Response from the administration. Have we heard anything about punishments for students involved, Christina?
Nothing about punishments yet. None of them have been either arrested because they dismantled after the NYPD was threatened to come in. But again, they were protesting because they were upset that students were punished in the past. One of their demands was no more punishment, which doesn't make any sense. So you want to break laws, disrupt other students' learning, be violent, and you don't want any repercussions.
All right, just bizarre. Christina Thompson, thank you so much for that update. We do appreciate it. All right, some breaking news we are following right now from President Trump on Truth Social, posting just a few moments ago, writing this: drugs are still pouring into our country from Mexico and Canada at a very high and unacceptable levels. A large percentage of these drugs, much of them in the form of fentanyl, are made in and supplied by China. More than 100,000 people died last year due to the distribution of these dangerous and highly addictive poisons. Millions of people have died over the last 2 decades. The families of the victims are devastated and in many instances virtually destroyed. We cannot allow this scourge to continue to harm the USA, and therefore, until it stops or is seriously limited, the proposed tariffs scheduled to go into effect on March 4th will indeed go into effect as scheduled. China will likewise be charged an additional 10% tariff on that date. The April 2nd reciprocal tariff date will remain in full force and effect. Thanks for your attention to this matter. God bless America.
Yeah, big takeaway there. Tariffs are coming again for China, doubling down on that, and it has to do with fentanyl, and obviously major concern for this administration, stopping fentanyl from being trafficked into the United States, and not just the trafficking part, but getting to the origins of it. And the vast majority of those hard drugs come across the U.S. southern border, smuggled into the country by violent cartels that control large swaths of Mexico. The fentanyl may come from China, as the president stated, but equally as dangerous is the white powder that comes exclusively from South America.
Newsmax correspondent Chuck Holton has been trekking through Central and South Americas, looking for change in those regions after President Trump took the oath of office and started closing the southern border. He's now in rural Colombia, where the lucrative cocaine trade begins.
It's a conflict most Americans know nothing about. Bombings, shootings, and clashes between guerrilla groups have turned Colombia into a battleground. The violence has left thousands homeless.
The current president, Gustavo Petro, set up a policy which is called Total Peace. And it's trying to build peace accords with every criminal organization in Colombia that mainly are supported by narco-traffic, the cocaine traffic.
These guerrilla groups control Colombia's cocaine trade, which supplies the U.S. drug market. Now that the Trump administration has cut off aid, Colombia's government is struggling to stop them. For years, the U.S. provided Black Hawk helicopters to help combat drug trafficking, and today, most sit idle. The freeze on U.S. aid has left the country's security forces without air support to fight these groups.
The ELN is like a paramilitary group in Venezuela. So the intention of Nicolás Maduro is to control the illegal business in Catatumbo, which is the second largest producer area in the world of cocaine.
About a third of all of the overdose deaths in the United States come from cocaine, not fentanyl. And the vast majority of the cocaine comes from here in Colombia. Now, that's controlled by one of two organizations, the FARC or the ELN. And those two organizations are being facilitated by the Venezuelan government right across the border here from me here in Cucuta. And the Trump administration has designated 8 cartels across Latin America as foreign terrorist organizations. But what the people here who are being pushed out of their homes are saying is that the Trump administration needs to focus more on the government of Nicolas Maduro.
There were bombs, gunfire, destruction everywhere.
And they probably do, because that's what you get into whenever you put stuff in other people's hands, in other people's trust. And now they're taking advantage of that situation. And it's just part of the gross negligence that the American government has done by not being able to monitor these smaller countries or these smaller independent agencies that are supposed to be working for the fairness and the good of all the people and not just part of the people. Listen to the rest of this, please.
They had to leave because of the fighting between the FARC and ELN.
The fighting has displaced tens of thousands. Many have sought refuge in temporary camps, relying on aid groups to survive.
En este momento nos encontramos en
We are dealing with a humanitarian crisis. Over 27,000 people have been displaced.
This pile of rubble behind me is all that's left of a police station, if you can believe that. Just a couple nights ago, a car bomb went off right where I'm standing and leveled the entire building. Fortunately, it was at late.
And 27,000 people or something like that. You know, that don't really sound like a high amount of people compared to some of these other bigger countries, including our own, pertaining to population-wise. But to them, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people that's been displaced that is now considered homeless. Thousands of lives that are at stake here towards being ruined, primarily because our American government agencies did not monitor that situation properly, and now we see who the true monsters are and who are the ones that's taking advantage of the American goodwill.
It was late at night and nobody was inside, but this is the kind of violence we're seeing in this area, and this is the reason why people are fleeing their homes. Despite the Trump administration's cartel crackdown, many in Colombia question why the Biden administration removed the FARC from the terror list in 2021, especially as it continues to dominate the drug trade.
We need helicopters, and we need the cooperation and intelligence also.
From Cúcuta, Colombia, I'm Chuck Holton for Newsmax.
All right, Chuck, thank you very
It's
much.
Colombia, South
A
America.
very interesting look sort of behind the scenes about how the country is so reliant on USAID, apparently. That stood out to me, that their operations to try to crack down on illegal drug trafficking rely 100% on funding from the United States.
Yeah. You know, in a perfect world, we live in a surplus of funding, of government funding that we could, you know, hand out here and there and help every nation. In reality, Colombia is not the only one that needs help out there of all the hundreds of countries out.
Exactly. They're not the only ones that need help out there. But you also need to realize where Colombia is, which is basically right at the mouthpiece of the Panama Canal that goes up into Mexico. That's the region right there that's basically allowing for Peru, Brazil, Chile, Belize, all these other places to hover in, because that's basically the doorway or the archway that will lead into America. That is wrong for them not to put up borders and to stop those type of people from coming into our area illegally. So to me, this is just my food for thought here. You would think that America would have had some sort of a post set up right there, because that's one of the thinnest areas in Mexico leading into South America before you leave Panama, is the Panama Canal right there. And you would think that that would be where our United States military force would make a stance in making sure that the people that was coming from at least South America was coming in a legitimate form. In other words, you headed off at the chase, not on the back end, pertaining to the border that's probably over 2,000 miles between San Diego and Monterrey or wherever it is down towards Brownsville, Texas. You would have a whole lot more control over at least South America if we had military forces right there that basically had a import, whatever you call it, migration import, to where we would know at least what was going on there. Is that going to make it foolproof? No, there's still going to be people that can boat in and hit places in Mexico that can still trample up through the hills and the hollers and still try to come over the Mexican border with all kinds of different types of drugs and other stuff. But I'm just throwing that out there, a food for thought, in the response of, first of all, our agencies over here in America was not paying close enough attention to that area that was taking advantage of the situation, getting all the free money. And now, because things is tightened, now they're taking it out on their citizens, which is a double wrong. That's a double standard wrong. And it just goes to show you what type of people that those people was that was sitting back and getting bloated off of the America's goodwill
that exist on this planet. But the United States at this moment just can't afford to help every single nation out there that indeed needs it, though it sounds nice. But it is not possible. You are $36 trillion in debt. If you keep on going, you will see the demise of this country.
Exactly.
What will you do then?
Exactly.
You see some of these protesters again still out here holding up the American flag, but again still upset about this. You don't see the protests when Amazon laid off their employees. They weren't out there, protesting to get
What
their
about
jobs
people
back.
who
And don't get me wrong, I understand completely regarding the good people, the good decent people, regardless whether they be in South America or the people in Mexico, that they don't want to raise a family with children in a surrounding area like that that's basically nothing but a wild, wild west. I understand that. They want a better living. They want to even at the expense of walking and possibly sacrificing their life for, they want to go to an area that is more civilized.
to combat the national debt and eliminate wasteful spending. Now he wants to cut foreign aid contracts. We'll discuss that more in our opening bell segment.
Let's watch the rest of this. I felt like that this was a good program to listen to regarding what all's happening right now in the Donald J. Trump administration.
By the state.
Let's back up. Back up. Right there. Hope.
Order now.
Forward a little bit. Right there.
All right, 9:38 Eastern Time, a live look here
Perfect.
in Manhattan as we watch the markets, the Dow, the S&P 500, NASDAQ, all in the green this morning. The Trump administration, meanwhile, saying it is eliminating more than 90% of the U.S. Agency for International Development's foreign aid contracts, USAID, and $60 billion in overall U.S. foreign assistance. And this is all part of Trump's effort to implement budget cuts across all federal agencies.
With us now, Thomas Savage is a research fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research, and E.J. Antoni is an economist at the Heritage Foundation and senior fellow at Unleash Prosperity. So welcome to you both, and thanks for coming on. Okay, Thomas, start us off. This decision by the Trump administration would end potentially 10,000 contracts and grants handed out by the State Department and USAID. What sort of global impact would this have?
Well, we'll definitely see a lot of shakeup there, but really the devil's in the details. If President Trump and Doge were really looking under the hood and seeing what was going on in these contracts, and they realized it wasn't in our national interest, it wasn't improving our national security or our cooperation with our allies, it's not worth continuing doing. It's something called the sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've made a mistake doesn't mean you should continue making a mistake.
Exactly.
And, EJ, as we look at some of the protesters gathering outside for those USAID employees, federal workers being laid off, talk to us about this. Perhaps you could pull in other companies that have had to make significant changes and layoffs just within the past year.
Well, it's interesting when we look at the jobless claims data, and we don't just look at the national data, but we actually delve into it at a more granular level. We see claims for jobless benefits spiking in Washington, D.C., and the greater Washington, D.C. area. And frankly, this is a good thing. We are getting people out of jobs where the work that they were doing was counterproductive and was actually aggravating a lot of the problems in our broader economy. And there's some, I would say, almost poetic justice here. The fact that so many of our economic problems are caused by the government spending too much money. And so ironically, getting people out of roles where they are facilitating that government overspending is going to help the nation heal economically. And again, there's some poetic justice here insofar as the people who have helped cause so many of today's problems are finally being asked to share in some of the pain, again, that those people helped cause.
All right, E.J. Antoni and Thomas Savage joining us. Thank you both. Attorney General Pam Bondi releasing the...
Which is a good thing, right? It's a good thing. It's making these other smaller countries be more accountable in what they're doing with our finances over here that the American people are being out money on. Plus, it's making the people accountable to their own people towards, are you truly taking care of the people that we sent this money to so that they would be taking care of their own citizens? Obviously, there must be a problem somewhere if you got 27,000 people that's already become displaced and becoming homeless and wanting to get away from these ruthless dictators over there. There's ruthless dictators everywhere. It's not just the oligarchs over in Russia. It's not just the oligarchs over in China. It's not just the oligarchs pertaining to a great nation like India that's on basically its own continent, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere where people has been getting a free ride, and basically the free ride is now over with. I put out an article not too long ago pertaining to, is the party over or has the party just begun? And it's still debatable in not what you're looking at, but how that you're looking at it in a determining factor of whether or not the party has stopped pertaining to people taking advantage of the American people, or the true party has just begun regarding us, we the people, standing up and making these mandates to our president that we want this to stop. And we do.
The Jeffrey Epstein files today, or at least a portion. We discussed that on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
And that's another thing right there that, as far as I'm concerned, was nothing but corruption pertaining to that guy's death, regarding all them pedophiles that was on that island, including that woman. I forgot the woman's name. They may mention in a minute. But supposedly having proof of people like Donald Trump going over to that island. I mean, not Donald Trump, excuse me. I'm totally wrong. People like Bill Clinton going over to that island. And the fact of the matter is, that man did not just up and die coincidentally towards hanging himself. But yet now all the cameras and all the equipment wasn't working that day. Kind of like what went on in my life whenever I supposedly made a threat towards going to Washington, D.C. in Wheeling, West Virginia to a 911 dispatcher. Okay? But yet now I was recording the exact conversation that was being recorded by the 911 agency, and whenever the guy that listened to the telephone call supposedly played it word for word and mine word for word, his explanation was, well, Your Honor, it must have been a failure in the equipment. Really? A failure in the equipment? And I'm sitting here and my testimony or my recording is identical to the 911 recording, which once more proves that that agency during the Bush administration, after Bush had become president, had went sour, that only wanted to discuss the word peace or throw the word peace out there, but in reality was plotting something completely, totally different, because that's basically whenever Desert Storm and Desert Shield started over there in the Middle East, and that's basically what put a target on our backs over here pertaining to 9/11. Pertaining to 9/11. Because whenever you go over there and stir up that much stuff, there's going to be retaliating figures and retaliating facts that's going to be involved that obviously somebody didn't sit down and itemize correctly. Now, did they? In addition to our own government not being on target towards stopping that, or at least stopping a great deal of that. And I still say to this day that second airplane that hit that second tower during 9/11 in New York City never should have done that, because there was plenty of time between plane number 1 and plane number 2 of shooting it out of the sky, including even if I was in it. If I was on that airplane and I didn't get shot out of the sky to prevent that many more thousands of people of dying, I would be complaining and throwing condemnation slurs at our government because of what various government agencies did not do. in addition to not shutting down the border, in addition to basically whoring itself out to now all these other countries. The Corps of Origin began in 1988 after Ronald Reagan finally completed what he was sent of God to do, and because Ronald Reagan's life was spared too, just like Mr. Donald Trump's. Ronald Reagan could have very well died in the assassination attempt, but he didn't. Why didn't he? Because God had his hand upon to that man. It just so happens whenever Reagan got off the airplane, they didn't fulfill their duties in response to biblical Bible prophecy. They made a conscious choice in that agency at that time that later, here come the Bushes, that basically wasn't even really thought of at that time, other than Bush Sr. working for Secret Service in and during the period of time whenever JFK got assassinated down in Dallas. So basically it was the Bushes that come in off the tailcoat of the Reagans that put them in power to begin with. And to think that the American people didn't get enough of that the first time, but then they voted in the same member family regarding Bush Jr., that basically opened up an avenue towards us being attacked, and we was attacked within about a year or so after that man became president. Whenever you slap people around, whenever you knock people around, just like I just got through discussing with my son, and maybe he don't want me even talking about this, but I am. He's over in the area right now, him and his wife and my granddaughter, in an area of Argentina, and I told him, just remember that those was the people that come to America that wanted to desecrate the indigenous Native American people. I said, I realize that people changes, cultures change, history changes, and it's not the same group of people over there that was over there 600-700 years ago that come over here, but that's where the stem of it began. You got to put a reference, a framing on the Corps of Origin towards what in the heck happened to the Native American people to begin with.
Something from happening. That justice is supposed to poll the other 8 within 24 hours. Now, perhaps the chief did that before he signed this, or perhaps he's doing that now. But just stopping this without giving a reason why is a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah,
a group of NGOs, non-government organizations, that rely on USAID for their existence, sued and said, we need this money, we give it away to poor people, they're starving, they have to eat. A federal judge accepted that argument and ordered the money paid by midnight last night. An appellate court said, we don't get involved in these temporary rulings, and then the Chief Justice did what he did.
And an administrative stay placed there by Chief Justice John Roberts. So, but it does make you question the executive powers of the president. When you see a federal judge step in and block what the president wanted to do, he wanted to stop this foreign aid going out. He saw it as wasteful spending. Hey, we can't afford it. Put a stop on it. And obviously, the lawsuits came forward. A federal judge steps back in. Then the Supreme Court Chief Justice comes in and essentially reverses what the federal judge does. Bottom line is, who's in charge is a big question.
Sean, that is a great question, and ultimately, this is going to come to a head. I understand President Trump's argument.
You know who the people that should be in charge? We the people, the taxpayers.
Ran for office and was elected overwhelmingly in part on this argument to cut out waste. But the money that is the dispute here was lawfully authorized by Congress, not by Joe Biden. And the president is, under the law, is supposed to spend money that Congress authorizes be spent, or propose an alternative in writing to see if Congress accepts the alternative. If it does, the alternative applies. If it doesn't, then he's got to spend the money. That's the federal law. At some point, the Supreme Court is going to have to interpret this with clarity. Perhaps this is the point, although I think it's a little early in the game because there are 40 lawsuits against the president in various federal courts around the country. We can't cover all of them, but we cover the ones that are most impactful, that affect the most people, or that make their way up the food chain of the federal judiciary.
Okay. If Trump briefly, there's so much to cover. If Trump wanted to just freeze the aid, would that be different than completely canceling the aid altogether?
Well, that would be called impoundment, and that's this statute. If he's going to impound the money, literally put it in a bank account and not touch it, he has to propose an alternative to Congress, otherwise he's got to spend the money. Under the law, he does not have the authority to cancel it. Again, I understand what he's trying to do. It would be a lot better if he did this by legislation, then all these cases go away.
Only 45 days in office, something around there, and you're seeing 40 plus lawsuits. If you ever learned about the powers of the executive branch, it's going to be in this term.
Are you suggesting that by the end of the year there'll be 365 lawsuits? I mean, that's the pace.
If you go by the stats, yeah, I mean,
Right.
it looks that way. Judge Andrew Napolitano will help us break all of those down. I know your homework continues to grow. Thank you, Judge.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, still to come. Hamas releasing the bodies of 4 hostages to the Red Cross in exchange for Israel's release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. A full report for you on the other side of the break.
Well, that's another cruel, sad situation right there. Let's go forward right here. It's not that I don't think that this broadcast
Hostage release and ceasefire.
that they're talking about right now isn't important, because I know that it is, but it's just that I want to go ahead and go through this a little bit faster in regard towards other matters that's going on. This is one of the most saddest things that I've ever seen happening in the 21st century, and I really, to this day, can't believe that it's going down the way that it's going down regarding Hamas, and I can't believe the way that
Here narrowly.
that so many different
Real Jody, thank you very much. Meantime, it's out.
so many different people here in America that basically started with the colleges and the schools. I can't believe that. I just can't believe that those same people are trying to put the finger off on it being Jerusalem's fault, even though it was Hamas the whole time that done what he done. It's hard for me to accept.
This at a Chicago airport. Turns out one of the pilots disobeyed instructions. What President Trump and the Transportation Secretary are considering now, coming up in the next hour of National Report.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.
Nobody wants to put a new roof over their head. It's too expensive.
Sorry about that. I had a
And if they
problem
can extend the
with a
life of that
cat
roof.
coming in here, a wild cat trying to get in my house, and I had to try to capture him real quick in a fish net. Somebody dropped off a cat around here yesterday, a black cat of all things, and I've done made my mind up that I'm not a bordering house for wild animals, and they can drop them off all they want to out here, but I'm going to capture them, I'm going to put them in a cage, and then I'm going to release them somewhere else, because I'm not a feeding institution towards a humanitarian animal shelter here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. So if you have any idea toward dropping off your animals, that's fine, which I think it's cruel to drop off an animal in a wildlife refuge, because you're basically just dropping off domestic animals to be prey for undomestic animals. But I'm just telling you, if you drop off any animals around here, they will be loaded up and they will be shipped out. And you may say, well, that's just cruel. Well, that's just cruel, isn't it? No, it's not cruel. It's reality. And the thing about it is, I'm not getting grants from the government or the state or the county to be able to maintain a shelter out here for people that does stuff like that. And because of it, I'll take care of the problem. And I'll take care of it one way or the other, similar to what Donald Trump's doing right now. He's going to take care of the problem. And the problem needs to be taken care of, because the problem never should have become this much of a problem in affecting so many different lives over here in America, towards us being whored out. And that's exactly what various politicians was doing ever since the Reagans and the Bushes done what they done. They have been whoring our government and our goodwill out that has turned this thing into what it is turned into.
How do you survive that? How do you climb out of that? Obviously, the sexual harassment allegations as well.
I don't know what this is. Let's move on. I thought they was going to be talking about the airplane flights a while ago. I seen that airplane. That's what I was hoping that they was. Here you go. Here you go, right here. I want to throw something else in here real quick after they get through with their broadcast here.
Avoiding a collision at Chicago's Midway International Airport. This was on a Tuesday morning.
And here it is, the Southwest flight coming in for a landing and then quickly going back up again after it was almost on a collision course with the pilot of the smaller jet that was crossing the runway at the same time. So thankfully, the Southwest pilot was quick thinking, by the way, and saved folks both in that plane and also the one on the private jet driving on by. Here with us to weigh in, Michigan Congressman Jack Bergman, a former commercial airline pilot and co-chair of the Congressional Aviation Safety Caucus. So, sir, you're the right person to talk to in this moment. We played the video here. Could you walk us through what's going on and what clearly almost went terribly wrong, but went wrong enough for it to be so close?
Well, one of the things that as I viewed the video, the most important element is to view the soundtrack, if you will, going on, the communications between the tower, between the aircraft involved. But all you see there is the Southwest jet going around. When you track the communications, it was pretty clear that there was some confusion on the part of the little private jet there.
Congressman, I'm going to pause you. I don't mean to, but we actually have that audio track that you're referencing. So let's get all the viewers on the same page, and then we'll have you respond. Here is that.
Okay.
Roger, that's maintain 3000. Exit 560, hold your position there. 3000. Station flight 560. Exit 560, continue across the hold short of hotel. Across hold short hotel, flight 560. Exit 560, your instructions are to hold short of runway 31 center.
And you hear it. He says to hold short there of runway 31 center. But obviously, as we see, he doesn't. And Congressman, if you wanted to respond to that, and what was happening with the air traffic control?
That's the whole point, is that the private jet that was cleared to taxi made the mistake of not holding short. So he didn't adhere to the instructions given to him by ground control, who was controlling it. What's so important here are two things. Number one, vigilance on the part of the pilots with the if you will, the visual, which you saw the Southwest pilots go around. It's a combination of hearing and seeing and communicating. Even these things, unfortunately, do happen, which means that it's only more important for the training that goes on all the time, whether it be amongst the pilots, whether it be amongst the ground controllers, the air controllers, whoever's happened to be, at that time. This is not a normal occurrence, but it also just says the importance of aviation safety standards and the adherence to them for this, safe travel of anybody who's flying. Statistically, and I know may sound like, bad things happen. This was a mistake, and there will be appropriate actions taken against that pilot for more retraining and make sure it doesn't happen twice. But as pilots, we are always on the edge of our seat, literally, especially as it comes to takeoff and landing, the two most challenging parts of any flight. And it's good on the pilot of the Southwest for making sure his situational awareness didn't get distracted by just landing the airplane as opposed to seeing who was going to cross that runway.
Yeah, and I've heard the comparison too. You're more at risk of getting in a crash on the drive to the airport than actually on your flight. So it's rare, but we've just seen more and more, and with everyone able to access technology, everything's caught on video these days. The Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy's weighing in just to reassure folks, saying the NTSB, FAA News investigating here the incident at Midway. However, it's imperative that pilots follow the instructions of air traffic controllers. If they do not, their licenses will be pulled. And even President Trump in the midst midst of his busy schedule, caught this moment too, just like the rest of us. He says, great job by the Southwest pilots in Chicago, a nearly tragic close call. Perhaps suspend the pilot's license of the other plane who must have been sleeping. Congressman, your thoughts there?
Well, the point is, I would suggest to you, probably there was maybe potentially for inexperience on the part of the little private jet pilot, and got a little confused. One of the things that's important to understand, I don't care whether you're an airline, the military, anybody, it's called selective scheduling, and you don't put two brand new pilots in an aircraft at the same time. We all have to get our experience through our flight hours, through all those real world kind of situations that we deal with. But the selective scheduling for pilots, the airlines do it, the military does it. Then you have to have the private sector to make sure that they are not being expeditious in their scheduling for the wrong reasons. So it's diligence.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you too. I mean, obviously, we're talking about situational awareness. It clearly was not there for the pilot that was piloting the private jet. Obviously, we talked about the radio communications with ground control, but obviously, you didn't see the giant airliner coming your way out the window as well. So it goes back to your point of situational awareness. But Emma touched on this too. We've seen a lot of these. We've seen a lot of crashes. We've seen a lot of issues with planes. Remember this Delta? This was in Canada, in Toronto. But this plane landed. It looked like it caught on fire, then flipped over, belly up, injuring around 18, I believe. Everyone making it out alive, obviously here. Then there was a $30,000 offer to every passenger on board if they decided not to sue, which some of them now are suing for a whole lot more than that, claiming they almost lost their life. But what do you say? Because there are, to the American public that fly or choose to fly and travel, which obviously millions and millions do, but you're seeing some wild times where some people are walking down those jetways and they're splashing holy water on the planes. I mean, there's a lot of concern. How do you tone that down?
Well, how can you create an environment where people feel safe exiting their home and going about their daily lives? We have to realize that people have to be aware of their surroundings, in this case the pilots, in the distraction. Let's say the two pilots in the small jet were looking down at their approach plates or their taxi instructions when one of them should have been looking out of the cockpit. It is all about training. It is all about awareness of your personal surroundings. Somebody walking down the street, be aware that the neighbor's dog might be out and may be hungry. You don't want to look like food to the dog. Okay, we have personal responsibility, but I'm here to tell you that the aviation industry is the safest mode of transportation historically and will be for the future, because when something bad happens, we tear it apart, figure out what happened, and train and retrain all those involved to get it right. Make sure it doesn't happen twice.
Yeah, indeed. And Sean Duffy is leading the way in the Secretary of Transportation. President Trump tuned in as well. And I guess last chance is that holy water that people are bringing. I got a flight tonight, Congressman. I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm
going flying here in a couple of hours. I'm taking off out of D.C.
Yeah.
Now, this is an attempt at humor, but I'm a Lutheran. I don't do holy water.
I'm a Catholic. We'll cover the bases. We'll be just fine.
Right.
Congressman Jack Bergman, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
You bet.
Ever since Elon Musk started up Doge, the left has been having a meltdown over this. Now they're targeting Tesla.
Left-wing extremists even threatening violence, including a man who brought incendiary devices to a Tesla dealership out in Colorado. What's going on here? Just because you drive a Tesla, are you now a target? Host of Sunday Report, John Glasgow, joins us now. And John, Elon Musk and Tesla, they've been the target of several recent protests.
That's right. I mean, this is just the latest arrest, but one of these protests here out of Colorado. You got to see this video. Take a look at this. This is Loveland, Colorado. This is a dealership there, a Tesla dealership where Cybertrucks and other cars cars, Tesla cars, they got tagged with red paint across the windshield in the letter X. Now, Loveland police said that they arrested Lucy Grace Nelson this week. The biological man is accused of vandalizing the cars, and incendiary devices were also found at the dealership. The transgender suspect is facing felony charges. Now, this is not the first time that Musk's Tesla cars have been targeted. Take a look at this guy, picked up in Bristol. He was smashing a Tesla as well. Police finally did pick up this guy after you can see there that people around were able to get video of it. Then in Maine, look at this. Protesters, they turned up at a dealership with signs and chants. They were protesting the man who is leading President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency. Even celebrities now are boycotting Musk. This happened just a few weeks ago. Take a look at this. Singer Sheryl Crow, well, she sold off her Tesla and posted it to Instagram. We do have that video. We'll get to that in a moment. But
there's going to be a ripple effect anytime you go in and you try to reform something or you make changes in something. There's always going to be a ripple effect, and that's what we're seeing right now. But I do want to go back to the aviation problem that here lately it seems like that there's more and more of that. Everybody wants to use everybody for a whipping post towards pointing their finger that it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, but it's not mine. Society's been doing that ever since Adam got talked into eating of the fruit that he shouldn't have eaten, which by and large, symbolically, it may not even been fruit. But the bottom line is that they was both told not to do something, and they went against God's wishes towards defiling God's wishes, and because of it, God intends for accountability to be given. Well, the type of accountability that Adam gave, well, it was the woman that you gave me that caused me to sin. And of course, Eve, her excuse was, well, it was the snake, it was the serpent that come in here and talked me into all this stuff, which by and large may have been true, but at the same time, you're still not standing on your own accountability. Getting back to the aviation problem, you know, here in America, we have different rules and regulations pertaining to driving experiences. And if you can't drive according, you get punished according. I realize they're going to pull the license from that jet of that guy that obviously got the order but didn't listen to it towards stopping or holding back, retracting. But there should be more in punishment other than going to take their license away from them. There should be some sort of punishment pertaining to fines. Like a $5,000 fine, maybe a $10,000 fine, I don't know. But I think that it would put the pressure upon these pilots in the extent of them being more on top of their game, being on their toes, because they know that if they do mess up, there's going to be heavy penalties to have to pay. The way that it's been for the past, I guess, ever since aviation has come into play, the only penalty that you get is you get your license pulled from you, and you can no longer fly as a pilot until you redeem yourself. And the next punishment would be the punishment of death, because if you were stupid enough that you done something like that, odds are it's going to cost you your life. The sad thing about it is it's not just going to cost that one pilot his life. It's going to cost dozens, if not hundreds of lives because of that one pilot. So whenever it comes to the excruciating punishment that should be applied to these pilots, I think it should be increased. Now, that didn't cost you nothing. That's just my opinion about it. But I also can foresee where a lot of these aviation problems are pertaining to our GPS system that is now off due to our north and our south is no longer true north and south due to the fact of what's going on below our feet, which is going to go over most people's heads regarding the magnetic pull of things that are now off, that my son said more than likely the computer's going to confiscate for. It's going to take up the differences on. Well, sometimes that may be true and sometimes it may not be true regarding something that is that imperative. In other words, whenever all my son's trucks has GPS units on it, and whenever he goes out onto a site expecting for a truck to be there in unloading concrete, and his GPS says, well, he's over here on this side of the site, but come to find out the truck is on the other side of the site, there's a problem in accuracy there. And like my son said, more than likely the computer is going to take up the differences on that. But here lately, there has been a flood of problems pertaining to all these different signals going on, and I tend to wonder if that in and of itself, like my son said, that is heating up the world. And the more and more that the world keeps heating up, the more and more that they keep creating more of these devices that are going to eat up that much more of these sound waves. If we could actually see the invisible sound waves that are going through our bodies right now and going through our homes and going through our cars, it would probably absolutely it would probably cause most people to faint. And that's being done all over the world as you're colonizing these continents, and you're getting more and more of these gizmos and gadgets. That's the heat intensity is only increasing, along with how the concrete holds heat, along with, as well as how the asphalt holds heat, along with ever moving part out there that creates static electricity, that creates heat. But so does these electrical waves that's going through the air, and even though we either didn't recognize it or it never has been proven, is actually creating heat. The same as you would be if you rubbed two pieces of whatever together and created friction. Something is causing these airplanes to fall out of the sky and not getting proper readings. And I said that earlier pertaining to Satan coming down in great wrath because he knoweth his time is short, in basically interchanging or overriding these systems to the degree of making them put out fake or phony reports that basically maybe, I can't prove it and I don't think no one else can, that the helicopter pilot in that helicopter, that happened almost a month ago now, over in Reagan Airport in D.C., he may have actually been seeing the instrument panel give out this number, but in reality, he was like 200 feet above where he should have been. Or it could have been that the power of Satan actually penetrated that man's mind to the degree that he was actually seeing a figure that wasn't real. People don't understand the entity that we're working up against pertaining to the powers of evil that have become smarter, have become more weightier, have become more powerful. And these are the things that incredibly is going to cause the end to civilization as we know it if we don't get on board in recognizing these problems. You have to first recognize the problem, and then you have to be willing to actually do something about it. Now, a while ago, I tried to capture that cat, and guess what? The net on my fishing net was brittle and probably not good enough. Anyways, the cat got away from me. Of all times, for me to be able to catch that wild cat that's been out here stealing feed from the rest of my two cats for the past 3 or 4 months, I had an opportunity to get him, but the net broke. Well, guess what? I'm gonna get a stronger net next time. That's right. I'm gonna get that dude. I'm gonna catch that dude. Because why? Because it's causing a handicap. It's causing a burden. It's causing a stumbling block in the other two cats. The other two cats, I had them fixed, and they're welcomed here. The long-haired golden Persian cats are welcomed here. But I don't expect for everybody and their brother to drop off animals out here, expecting for Dennis Jackson to feed them, because Dennis Jackson is running some sort of a humanitarian animal shelter out here, because I'm not. And that's one of the problems out here, that we do live in a wildlife refuge area, and to think that the people are thinking the way that the animals are only gives out that many more bad signals of how unhumane that some of these people around here actually are. You have to be willing to take care of the animal. The animal is not going to take care of itself. That's where the responsibility fails pertaining to the human factor. And if the human factor don't do its job, in actuality, then people shouldn't have an animal. Just like in actuality pertaining to loving their children and taking care of their children, we're dealing with a society today that really didn't think about tomorrow. Didn't think about the day after tomorrow, regardless whether it was their child, my child, or my grandchild, or their grandchild. But now this is all catching up with us. Now it's all catching up with us, and we're realizing they have basically cut off their own noses to despite their faces, because now we're 30 plus years behind towards the actual second coming or the global resurrection that should have already occurred, towards taking out the bridemaid pertaining to the church, and we should have already been rewarded up in heaven, and we should be exempt from going through the problems that we're going through right now. But we're going through them because of this rebellion that happened in the Reagan and the Bush's administration. I wanted to get that out there to make sure that people understood that pertaining to aviation and the importance of it. Because we're not just talking about somebody speeding and getting a ticket and it costing $200 or $300 in the courthouse. We're talking about human beings' lives. And we're talking about aviation should put their foot down in making sure that any carelessness in any part will be handled efficiently and effectively towards punishment.
Comments could have something to do with this moment right here, when Musk made a salute at Trump's second inauguration that some interpreted to be a Nazi salute. Well, it also could have something to do with the federal cuts that Musk is making. He's also been making those with the recommendation of Doge and President Trump, so trying to cut back on that. Now, the world's richest man has...
See, once more, people can make anything out of anything. They can let their imaginations run wild, and they can say, well, this guy here, he was doing a Nazi salute. Well, to me, he was just waving his arm towards maybe getting rid of something or cutting something, indicating that in which what he was talking about. People want to criticize people, they want to demonize people, and they want to basically want to destroy something good. That way the bad can keep exceeding over the good. Until the American people and the world is willing to smarten up to these things, these tactics that evil, demonic is doing in working through these crazy people like this, we're not going to settle what's happening to us. These people are mentally deranged. Something's wrong with them.
As other vehicles, they're stenciling different makes and models over the Tesla emblem. However, Sean and Emma, the question is, will it work? Because Musk cars, they are very distinct in appearance. Take example, that Cybertruck. Hard to confuse that with something else that's on the road.
I was going to say, remember the Volkswagen, the punch bugs? Whenever you'd see one, you'd punch someone in the car.
Yeah. All right, let's go forward here. We probably would have covered the bases on all that. All right, let's stop here.
So Trump posted on Truth Social yesterday that he was, quote, reversing the concessions of the oil transaction agreement dated November 26, 2022. He didn't specifically mention Chevron, but what he's referring to, Sean and Emma, is the Biden administration's agreement back then allowing Chevron to expand its oil production and operations in Venezuela in order to bring more crude oil into the United States. The agreement ultimately allowed Chevron to produce and sell oil despite sanctions against President Nicolas Maduro and his government. And under the terms of the license, Chevron would have had to exit Venezuela by the end of July. But now Trump is saying he wants that done next month. Chevron is really essential to Venezuela's economy, and both Trump and Maduro certainly know that, and the move represents really an increase on U.S. restrictions on Venezuela after the country's contested election last year that extended, as we saw, Maduro's overall reign. And then
there's no doubt that area produces some of the most filthiest crude gasoline and diesel fuel in the world. I don't know if their refinement isn't as good or what the deal is, but to me, leaving that over there, letting them do what they're doing over there and trying to clean up their act down there in South America sounds to me like a good thing. I actually support this ideal.
In parentheses, the good old USA, back to Venezuela at the rapid pace they had agreed to. Ultimately, about 150 illegal migrants were sent back to Venezuela, I believe, last week. Several thousand more actually have been sent to Guantanamo Bay. So clearly, this is part of the strategy to put pressure on Venezuela and, obviously economic pressure on Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro, you guys.
Talk to us about Chevron, John. Just how much oil was Chevron producing in Venezuela? What's the impact there?
Yeah, a good amount. So Venezuela, with Chevron's help, was producing upwards of 1 million barrels of oil a day, and Chevron was producing more than 200,000 barrels a day. This is as of mid-2024, so that number actually may have gone up. So again, losing Chevron would be a big economic hit for Venezuela's economic recovery efforts, guys. Back to you.
The power of the Truth Social posts, right? Those tend to have an impact. John Huddy, thanks so much.
Indeed. Well, residents of North Carolina continuing to rebuild their communities after Hurricane Helene devastating the region back in 2024. A North Carolina congressman joining us after the break to discuss the recovery efforts taking place in Tar Heel State. You're watching National Report.
That's another sad situation that has been mishandled by our officials. That how can we basically take care of our own whenever all this free money is going out unappropriately to all these other people? I've never seen such of a mess. And this is the results towards what occurred that shouldn't have occurred during the resistance movement of the Windmill Ministries missions. And now I can sit back and I can watch these things and I can decipher them accurately and saying, you know what, this shouldn't have happened, or this should have been what was going on, or it shouldn't have been what was going on. And basically being a spectator to all these problems. And I hope people in Kenton, Tennessee that was a part of this anti-Juby movement, are the people in Obion County, people in Weakley County, are the people in Washington, D.C., or are the people in Wheeling, West Virginia, wherever. I just hope now that they can see that this movement that they took a part of in being the anti-Juby movement of the anti-Windmill Ministries movement has now put everybody in behind the 8 ball.
$59 million going to a little small group in New York City. You get nothing going to North Carolina to help nothing. They say we don't have any money because they've given it away on the border.
Right.
But you have nothing. What they did to North Carolina is a shame.
President Trump there discussing FEMA's distribution of funds under the previous Biden administration. Since taking office, the president has attempted to right the wrongs by President Biden and even proposed dismantling the agency altogether.
Yeah, his comments coming as communities, as you see here in North Carolina, continuing to rebuild, even in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene devastating the region in 2024. North Carolina residents were pushed to the side by the Biden administration, but Trump and his team have visited the area multiple times, reassuring residents they will not be forgotten this time around with this administration. For that, we bring in North Carolina Congressman Chuck Edwards. He joins us here. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us here on National Report. Recovery efforts thus far, how have they been? What have your constituents needed?
Well, there's no question that our momentum in Western North Carolina has picked up since President Trump delivered on his promise to not forget Western North Carolina. His very first trip on Air Force One was to my district, where he reiterated the need for us to accelerate our recovery, and he certainly has gotten the attention of FEMA, the USDA, highways, national forests, and many, many others. I think they've got the picture, and we're picking up momentum thanks to President Trump.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, Congressman. You've also got the attention of the DHS Secretary, who wants to take a closer look at FEMA, right? Wanting to make sure that those funds are actually used to assist Americans in need of emergency assistance. Here's Secretary Kristi Noem on an appearance on CNN. Let's watch.
Get rid of FEMA the way it exists today. We still need the resources and the funds and the finances to go to people that have these types of disasters like Hurricane Helene and the fires in California. But you need to let the local officials make the decisions.
So, Congressman, would you agree that state leaders might be better equipped to deal with FEMA funds?
As a previous state senator, I absolutely agree with the Secretary that the folks in the state are far better prepared to deal with boots on the ground and serve the people in those states than the bureaucracy that we see here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, talk to us about that, because one of the big sticking points about allowing the states to do it is these state leaders and those in charge, they know these areas, they know the big communities, they know the rural communities, they know how they operate, they know how to work hand in hand. They perhaps can use the money in a more successful way than maybe those coming from D.C. flying in and handling it. You know the area.
Not only do these folks know the area and understand the topography and the people, they know the capabilities of their own state government. You know, right now, North Carolina is in the process of submitting an action plan to the federal government on how to spend the funds that Congress has already appropriated. And it looks like that action plan, without intervention from the president or my office, could take up to 5 months to even become approved before we can start getting money out the door. That's just but one example of the bureaucracy that folks have to deal with here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And there's a much better way. I trust the folks in North Carolina to make those decisions far better than I do the folks up here in Washington.
Yeah. Still praying, by the way, for those recovery efforts. We know, based on the devastation, it will take years to attempt to rebuild. Some places, unfortunately, gone for at least the time being. That is Congressman Chuck Edwards joining us. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
A lot of other developing stories we are following for you right now.
Alex Kramer's live in studio. She's got your Newsmax News Minute. Hey, Alex.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Sean. Well, how about this? 11 years after it disappeared, a U.S. company is resuming the search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 on a no-find, no-fee basis. So Ocean Infinity, which is based in Texas, previously searched back in 2018, but found no signs of that plane. However, it says that if
I want you to keep in mind, too, as you're listening to this particular recording, it was the oil industries that was the lead off from OPEC out of Saudi Arabia that basically jacked up all these oil prices the way that they did in the middle or during the latter part of COVID. That has now put a strain on everything all over the world. Now, there's no doubt whenever Obama was president in 2008, whenever the bubble burst happened with the real estate and the banks collapsed and etc., there's no doubt that at that time, gasoline still went to $4 or $5 a gallon right here in Northwest Tennessee, and in some places was higher than that depending upon where you was. It just so happens that the business people ate that rather than passing it down to the consumer, which is us. Since COVID has hit, that's diminished their sales. Now they're having to make up time. So basically everybody and their brother is jabbing the public right now, price fixing. That's basically passing it down to the average consumer, which is adding that much more insult to injury that began with greed with OPEC.
Years about the prospect. What is Congress really looking to cut? We will discuss that with one member of Congress on the other side of the break.
All right, let's go a little faster here. Keep on going. I realize I'm trying to put a lot here into this. This is a lady here from Tennessee. She made a lot of good sense. I've already watched part of this morning. That's the reason why I'm wanting to record it. She made a lot of good sense. I want you to listen to this, please, if you don't mind.
On Medicaid.
It comes after House Republicans passed a budget blueprint this week outlining where cuts could be made to the federal government. The bill tasks the Energy and Commerce Committee to find some of the spending which Democrats claim could be used to gut Medicaid. Let's talk about it now with Tennessee Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger, serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. So, Congresswoman, welcome to National Report. Going to take a closer look at where excess spending is happening in the federal government to save some money here. So can you assure that Medicaid will remain as it is today?
Yes, ma'am. Medicaid will stay intact. You know, since 2019, the last 5 years, we've seen an increase in Medicaid it's a 51% increase. You have people, 60% of the people on Medicaid now are not who it was intended for, not the disabled, not the pregnant women, not the elderly. These are able-bodied people, 60% of that. So, yeah, there's a lot to cut with fraud, waste, and abuse, but no one's going to lose their Medicaid if they are legitimately qualify for that. So the fear-mongering that the other side, the Democrats, are doing is unfounded.
Yeah, see, if you leave off the end of that response that you gave, it's easy to spin that narrative into the left's favor of cutting Medicaid. It's just cutting the people that should not be on Medicaid. Not everybody. There are different qualifications that you would meet to be able to receive Medicaid. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is not in favor of pulling back on Medicaid, which you're not. Other Republicans aren't either. But he's open to reform. Let me play this for you.
I'm not going to vote for Medicaid cuts, benefit cuts. Work requirements, fine, but 21% of the residents of my state receive Medicaid or CHIP. That's a lot of people. It's like 1.5 million people in Missouri. So work requirements, sure, 100%, but anything that slashes into benefits for people who are working, I'm not going to be for it. I think that's probably true of a lot of my colleagues, but ultimately I can only speak for myself.
And it kind of goes back to the framework being passed in the House. Obviously, this has a long way to go. Perhaps we'd see some movement months from now. But he talked about specifically work requirements. Have you given any thought to that or any other mandates, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got able-bodied people on Medicaid that probably shouldn't be on there, all we're asking is you work like 20 hours a week. And if you're in a treatment facility, that counts. If you are taking care of someone who needs to be taken care of, like an elderly parent, that counts. If you are doing social work or you're volunteering, all that counts. But the significance in what that will cut, $100 billion just in that alone, if you implement work requirements on these people that are able-bodied, it's not intended for the disabled, the elderly, or pregnant women. For goodness sakes, they want to scream, but look, it's not the federal government that would take someone off of Medicaid. That is your governor. That is your state. So all we're saying is let's put caps on the money that we're sending. Let the state be in charge of putting people on or off Medicaid. If they shouldn't be on there, then it's up to the state to take them off. But if you can save almost $900 billion where there's fraud, waste, and abuse, why? We're tasked with this. This is a mandate from the American public. We are supposed to stop the spending and bend the spending curve because we're $36 trillion in debt. And if they want to argue about that, then we've got a great argument to hand them.
Listen to me. This is the reason why your potholes on your road ain't getting fixed. This is the reason why the bridges are dilapidating and starting to fall in. This is the reason why that we're not getting better school systems, or we're not having better this or better that, is because the system is being taken advantage of. I wanted to add this regarding people that's sponging from the system. This is the results from going to the top to the bottom in the past 30 plus years, and how that they have basically given the farm away to the degree that, especially in your rural areas, a lot of these teenagers and a lot of these people just getting started in life, they don't have no other opportunities because the opportunities isn't there for them to get a good job. Because all the factories have moved overseas because of people like the Waltons or other retailers. This just didn't happen overnight. This happened in the period of days, weeks, months, and even years, okay? And now we're seeing the results from this. But you also got to keep in mind this, whenever it comes to fraud and abuse, somebody like me that probably should have remained on disability, knowing that I had 2 broken legs, 2 crushed ankles, 3 crushed vertebrae, 2 ruptured discs, and 2 broken arms, after me falling 37 feet, basically 4 floors, off the A.L. Smith building in Milan, Tennessee, me being at the age of 19, being bedridden for 6 weeks, 3 days, flat on my back in Madison County, Jackson, Tennessee hospital. If the truth be known, I should have remained on disability. Do I get any credit for that? No. I don't get no credit for that. I struggled. I gritted my teeth. And you know what? I put up with the pain. And a lot of that pain I had to live with for years and years and years. And I still put up with uncomfortableness pertaining to those injuries. But I didn't let it stop me. And I did not let it give me the license to get out here and live a life of basically freelancing. Because I've always been taught, just like the Bible teaches, that if a man won't work, don't feed him. In other words, you pull your own weight. And so it took about 4 or 5 years. My son don't realize that. I was going through some hard times during that time, because it takes time to learn how to walk again. It takes time to learn how to adjust to that pain. It takes time to learn how your feet is no longer functioning the way that they did, because you've taken a lot of that movement out. And now I wear out shoes that ordinarily people don't wear out. Now I create calluses in my feet that ordinary people don't create. But I'm still on my feet, though I'm being penalized, not only that way, towards having to put up with the pain and the injuries, which isn't nobody's fault but my own, but the fact of the matter is I'm having to put up with the fact of the people not recognizing the sacrifices that I've made by doing that. Plus, whenever I come back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014, within about 6 months, somebody took a pot shot in catching me on a ladder, and now turned it into my Social Security Disability Administration. And the next thing you know, I get this letter, this real glamorous letter from the Social Security Department that they're going to reevaluate my case, and that my Social Security that they had given me may very well have to be all returned. Do you not think that that made me sick at my stomach, to think that I come back to Northwest Tennessee and the results towards wanting to help people, and this gets thrown up in my face? Fortunately, they handled it properly in the Social Security Administration. It went to some sort of board up in Washington. They looked at it. They examined it. They looked at the different problems that I've went through throughout my life. And it come back, hey, you need to leave this guy alone. Matter of fact, we're explaining to you right now, you won't never have to go through this again, Mr. Jackson. Well, even my son said, because of the way that they got me documented towards me not only having physical impairablenesses, but also having mental impairablenesses based upon what went on, or what started in the arena of the authorities going all the way back to 1983 in Kenton, Tennessee with Damian Cross. But they also had me mentally impaired. So like my son said, Dad, it wouldn't matter if you was to go to the Social Security office right now and start doing somersaults and cartwheels, proving that you do have physical abilities to hold down a job. Because of your mental status, they can't do nothing to you. Well, you know what? I could be like I was back in 1979, which was basically going back almost 45 years ago, or a little longer, or right at 45 years ago. I could basically take advantage of that situation and say, you know what, you're right. I'm just going to lounge around. I ain't going to help nobody. I ain't going to help myself. I ain't going to give out no input. I'm not going to share my opinions with nobody. And I'm not going to try to help nobody. Just like the hours and hours and endless hours that I spend in front of these TVs making these recordings. Is there really anybody in Northwest Tennessee that really appreciates that? You know why they don't appreciate that? Because it's the truth. And they look at me, towards me being basically the ramrod, kind of the way that they look at Elon Musk or Donald Trump, towards basically being the condemner, bringing condemnation to the people. And the thing about it is, the condemnation deserves to go to the people that allowed for this to get out of hand the way that it did. I'm not the one that needs to be victimized again and again and again, pertaining to the struggles and pertaining to the anointing that fell upon my life to begin with, going back into 1988, 30 plus years ago. But I'm still being victimized, or I'm still not being appreciated, or I'm still making these videos and it being ignored. Once more, they thought that they was going to escape the price in basically wanting their cake and eat it too. They talked about peace. But in reality, they didn't want peace. We've seen what went on in Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And of course, that created 9/11. And of course, on top of that, we've seen what went on in Afghanistan. One problem adding to another problem. And I've said all along that it was our government agencies, our authentic authorities, regardless whether it was a judge or a congressman or a senator or a mayor or whoever, took the wrong path that now we're all paying for.
Oh, from USAID. So you see some folks
Took the wrong path that now we're all paying for, that now we can see that it's come back to bite all of us in the rear ends. But yet, no, you still don't see nobody coming up to the plate and saying, you know what, this man right here is right. What he's talking about is correct. We should hold responsibility towards what went on in not only Obion County, Weakley County, but Washington, D.C., and the rest of these surrounding areas that knowed about the Windmill Ministries.
We're in uncharted territory. Nobody's ever done this in the federal government. You do it in private businesses. But look, it's like I was with the speaker this morning in our doctor's caucus meeting, and this is what he told us. Each head of department, like the Secretary of State Rubio, has a stack of papers of everything that USAID, everything that the State Department's in charge of, and they're going through line by line saying, we need to keep this program. No, we need to get rid of that. Even though they've said that they've gotten rid of a lot of these programs, if they're spending money that we shouldn't be sending to foreign countries, they're going line by line through this. And that's what the other agencies will do as well. Just because they were taken off the payroll, maybe they were not working. We don't know, but you can always reinstate those people at the GS level that they were at. But for God's sakes, you have to start somewhere. And I'm of the sentiment that once you begin this program, you can do the fine tweaks down the road. But if we don't start here, and we don't start now, when are we ever going to start to bend the spending curve? It's okay to, both parties want to spend, but somebody has to have common sense for this uncommon nonsense that the Democrats are spewing, and we have to begin to bend that spending curve.
Exactly.
All right, Tennessee Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Good to see you. We do appreciate that.
And still to come, President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth making some big changes at the Pentagon. What could that mean for the future of the Department of Defense? We'll bring you a full report on the other side of the break.
You know, folks, I thank God.
Now, she just made a whole lot of sense. We're going to listen to this report real quick about the Pentagon, and then I'm going to weigh in on what we've been talking about visually in a direct way. And hopefully, whoever listens to this or gets a hold of this, they'll be able to not only understand it, but they'll be able to appreciate the fact of what has occurred here should not have ever occurred. And now accountability has come into play, and the people that are basically being the ramrods of the accountability are being degraded, dehumanized, attacked, threatened, and all the above, towards trying to help humanity rather than hurt it. It just goes to show you how deranged and how upside down things has been that has multiplied in the past 30 plus years about all this. I've never seen a group of people in my entire life that was dead set in wanting to bring self-destruction to their own lives. And it's one thing if you want to bring self-destruction into your own life, and it's another thing, it's a completely different picture. It's a completely different picture towards wanting to bring destruction into the lives of the innocent. Whenever that occurs, that's whenever God looks down upon to the people and said, you know what? I'm no longer going to protect you and protect your ignorance this way, because you have brought this upon to yourselves. And basically, that's whenever the Heavenly Father looks over at Lucifer and says, why don't you do your job? Sick 'em. And that's exactly what we've been seeing, regardless whether it was in this category, that category, over here in this area or that area. That's exactly what we've been seeing. And you know what? I think the Heavenly Father is just like me regarding all this stuff in the past, in saying that it couldn't have happened to a better group of people. But on the same note of that, I think that the Heavenly Father feels sorry and pities those that didn't have nothing to do with this, that are having to wreak condemnation on account of what the elderly and the baby boomer generation has done. And it wasn't just here in Northwest Tennessee, but it was by and large all over America. That started in Washington, D.C. at the White House with the Reagans and the Bushes. All right, let's go. Yep, right there.
Find the perfect gift.
And he probably is in a lot of different perspectives. He probably is. But if everybody keeps telling you, oh no, he's a curse versus a blessing, he's a curse instead of a blessing, what you know what's going to happen? You're going to have people that's going to think more of Donald J. Trump and Elon Musk towards being a curse than you will a blessing. You know why? Because people thinks of the now pertaining to the me, the personal me, and now. They think about what's going on right now. They can't see a year from now. They can't see 2 years from now. They can't see 5 years from now. And they can't see 10 years from now, because that's obvious. Proof is in the pudding towards what the generations has done before we are where we're at right now, in giving everybody the problem. Everybody now is in behind the 8 ball.
Protesters are there. Lawmakers holding this hearing about a bill that would remove gender identity protections from the state's civil rights code that was implemented back in the early 2007. Protests began outside, but now it appears as though they have now moved from outside to inside the state building, which we believe would, by all accounts, be a violation of state laws. Now there appears to be a shift, at least on the left side of the screen. I don't know if someone is there trying to move them out of the place there, but either way, those advocating to keep those protections for gender identity.
I don't know. Protesters are still there, but they're not permitted to enter the building in this capacity. Of course, we're reminded of the last time people infamously entered a Capitol building on January 6, 2021. But we're seeing this happen now, trying to get a hold of, by the way, some lawmakers who might be there now or at least could comment on the matter. But it doesn't look like they've got a scheduled meetup with their state lawmaker.
You hear a lot of the chants. You can see obviously some of the trans representation colors. You can see some of the pronouns of they and them. I'm just reading through some of the supporters of this bill. Say that it protects women, what they're doing, though they're passing in Iowa. Again, separating men and women. And again, reminding of that executive order on day one issued by President Donald Trump, identifying a woman as a woman, men as men, and leaving it at that. But obviously, Iowa following through on that, but again, changing their laws to do.
Now, you see what's going on right now? This is a group of people that's mixed up. They're upside down. The same way as the people that was degrading Jerusalem, Israel, of defending themselves after being attacked by Hamas. Whenever you're dealing with a group of people that has been so deceived in calling good bad and bad good, you're basically dealing with a society that is doomed. A society that is doomed. Especially doomed whenever it comes to the blessings of the Heavenly Father. Now you wonder how come you've seen floods, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, and all the other horrible, horrible events that's happened to us in the past 30 plus years. You wonder how come that were $36 trillion. You wonder how come that basically we've seen AIDS, we've seen COVID, we've seen all these other different diseases towards cancer being rapid. You wonder how come that we've seen all the suicides and all the drug overdoses and all the other bad stuff that's happening to us. Well, now I hope that you're starting to get a better picture of this pertaining to the people that has been driving or leading everybody else off into the mouth of the volcano. And now suddenly you got a group of people that's opening up their eyes and saying, hey, wait a minute. This is where we went wrong at. But you still got people like this that's saying otherwise. it starts at the top and it goes to the bottom. That's what happened to the trickling effect, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes. It started at the top in every category that you can think of, and then it rippled right on down in contaminating America to the extent of seeing the damages that we're seeing today. And to think that people over in Kenton, Tennessee, Sharon, Tennessee, Martin, Tennessee, Dresden, Tennessee, Greenfield, Tennessee, and all these other remaining areas around here that at one time gave me the middle finger has now avoided me. They don't want to talk about it. This is inappropriate. Oh, really? I've always been told to strike the iron while the iron's hot. I think it's the most appropriate time to bring up these backsliders and these lukewarmers that has led us down this road, this endless road of condemnation. That's not only affecting the people that it should be affecting, but now it's affecting the lives of the innocent. This is what you get, Kenton, Tennessee. This is what you get, O'Brien in Weakley County, Tennessee. This is what you get, Nashville, Tennessee, and Washington, D.C., whenever you try to do something that you wasn't supposed to do, in contradicting your own laws, in breaking your own constitution, in attacking a ministry that was set towards doing good and not bad. Now, you can be a coward about this and hide under the rock if you want to and think, well, I ain't going to have to give no accountability to the public pertaining to all this that went on in Mr. Jackson's life. Well, that's fine. Maybe you won't in this lifetime, but I promise you in the lifetime to come, you will give an account. You will give an account for the things that you either done that you shouldn't have done, or the things that you didn't do that you know that you should have done. All the way to the highest, all the way to the lowest. And this is only an example of it by seeing the carnage of what we're seeing, that even Christ said that if the blind lead the blind, they both shall lead us off into the ditch. I think the Neal family really needs to look close at this, because in 1983, of all families around here, that responsibility fell upon to Leroy Neal, Terry Neal, and the Neal family. And they basically swung at it and missed it by 3 foot. Because they could have prepped. They could have mementored. They could have sat down and understood the Bible the same way that I was understanding the Bible in the pros and the cons. Was they willing to do that? No, this was too strong. This was too stout. We're Christians. We're just going to disappear. Ain't none of us going to have to worry about no pain as far as dying. Well, you know what? I've died several times, and I would rather die 1,000 times than to sit idly by and not say the truth in what has occurred here pertaining to this travesty that now the rest of the world is being tarnished on account of.
Free Epstein files today. We'll bring you the latest reporting on that at the top of the hour.
I still say that man was killed. He was killed because he was in close quarters, and they shut off all the equipment, and they used that for an excuse, and they went ahead and killed him because he was going to cause too much political damage with too many other people's lives. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, even Donald Trump said that he was killed after we found out that he was dead. Was it really ever investigated? Maybe to some extent. But you know what? You can pay the coroner off just like you can pay the judge off. You know what? You can pay the judge off just like you can pay the sheriff off. If the blind lead the blind, Tommy Moore, Mike Wilson, Tommy Thomas, Judge Parham, all these other people that have sworn to take care and protect us, now you're seeing what you've created.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Our national correspondent Logan Raddick joins us live from the Pentagon with more on these personnel changes and how the department is reprioritizing how it spends money. Logan, good morning.
And then, Sean, good morning. And the Defense Department is in the process of firing 5,400 probationary workers, and it's also going to be implementing a hiring freeze. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has also directed the department to identify $50 billion in programs that could be cut in the next year. That's 8% of the military's budget. The money would be redirected towards President Trump's priorities, which include building an Iron Dome for America. Darren Selnick, who's performing the duties of Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness, says
that Iron Dome that they're talking about should have got started shortly after Ronald Reagan got to talking about Star Wars. To give you an idea of how far we are now behind everything. We're basically about 35, 40 years in behind just that entity alone towards protecting and taking care of the American people. The Iron Dome, that I think is a good idea. I think it's a great idea. But at the same time, I'm gonna be a straight shooter about it, and I'm gonna call black, and I'm gonna call a spade, and I'm gonna tell you right now that our entities that was in charge of all that failed us because they should have went active immediately, proactive in building the Iron Dome. But did they? No, they sat on easy street. Oh, we can just sit back and we can feed our pockets while our pocketbooks is getting full, while everybody else is under the risks.
950,000 person workforce by 5 to 8%. And Secretary Hegseth also revealed more potential firings at yesterday's White House cabinet meeting.
We're doing a complete review of every single aspect of what happened with the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan and plan to have full accountability. It's one of the first things we announced at the Defense Department for that reason, sir.
Amen.
Certainly, General Raising Kane, who's on his way in, was not a part of that. Instead, was a part of leading the effort against ISIS by untying the hands of warfighters and finishing the job properly and then bringing our troops home. So we're taking a very different view, obviously, than the previous administration, and there will be full accountability.
I don't see big promotions in that group.
And the Pentagon has also ordered a purge of its social media sites to get rid of DEI references by March 5th. If they can't complete that task on time, they'll be ordered to temporarily remove from public display all content that was published during the Biden administration. And according to a recent court filing, the Pentagon is moving to disqualify transgender service members from the military within 30 days. So Sean and Emma, a lot going on here at the Pentagon in terms of changes being implemented by the Trump administration. Back to you.
Now let's go back to what you're talking about as far as transgender people in the military. It was the Bushes that compromised in our morals that started this don't ask, don't tell. And now today, you're not supposed to approach somebody as sir or miss, but sergeant, lieutenant, colonel, whatever their name is. Do you not see how badly that things has gotten out of whack? That a lot of these teachers and preachers and a lot of these officials, even right here within throwing distance, we're talking about the smart people now. We're talking about the educated people that could read and write. We're talking about the people that said that they could read the Bible and interpret it correctly. That has put us in this shape that we're in right now. I can. And if I can, I think somebody else can. Now, whether or not you want to admit to it, and whether or not you want to acknowledge these things the same way that other people now are admitting and seeing these things, that's going to be up to you. But I'm telling you right now where it began. And I know it ain't going to completely, totally end during the presidency of Donald J. Trump, but at least maybe it'll get the ball on the road towards taking care of a lot of the problems that never should have been exacerbated to the level that it is right now to begin with. Or that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that that the free party's over towards people getting a free ride, and even if it requires retraining people and restructuring what needs to be restructured here in America, this is 30 years behind time. 30 years behind time that never should have gotten this far out of whack.
Morning, President Trump set to host British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, set to discuss the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. and bilateral trade ties. They will have a bilateral presser at 2 p.m. this afternoon Eastern Time. Thanks so much for tuning in to the third hour National Report. I'm Sean Kreisman.
And I'm Emma Reckenberg. Prime Minister Starmer is the second European leader to meet with President Trump this week. It comes after...
We're going to end this right here. Or we're going to try to attempt to end this right here. In the meantime, I'm going to turn my camera around just a little bit. Get this right over here, where I usually put it. Right there. Now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to address this in a hopefully a better way. I am so sorry for the lives of the innocent, for the millennials, for the children growing up. And I ain't just talking about children such as my granddaughter that's going to be 2 in the next couple of months. But I'm so sorry that so many people out there have been bamboozled. They've been hoodooed by their own culture or generations above them. Even though I didn't have nothing to do with it personally, because I've always wanted to embrace love, grace, mercy, and the things of the Bible pertaining to peace and utopia. But people didn't want to support that. Maybe they've learned their lessons, maybe they hadn't, but I do know this. I don't see people knocking down my door. I don't see my phone blowing up. I don't see my emails being overwhelmed. And I don't see people coming clean that took a part of this yet, going back to the Reagan era and the party surrounding the cabinet members, including the media, towards coming clean on this. And probably never will in this lifetime. Probably never will, to a big certain extent. But don't you think for a second, Kenton, Tennessee, don't you think for a minute, Sharon, Tennessee, and Greenfield, and Rutherford, and Dyer, and Union City, and all the surrounding areas, as well as Washington, D.C., that you won't give an account for it one day, because you will. You have brought this horror show to all of us. Some people want to call it a circus. Well, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but I guarantee you, it's not on account of people like Elon Musk. It's not on account of people like Donald Trump. It's not on account of people like Dennis James Jackson, the one that's sitting here talking to you right now. So rather than attacking the true people that are trying to get this back in alignment and seeing the damage that has been done, I hope to God that the young people especially will be able to look at their constituents pertaining to the elderlies and the older people that have sat idly by and let this happen. It don't matter if it's the Neils, it don't matter if it's the McWrights, it doesn't matter if it's the Simmonses, it doesn't matter if it's the Calvin Halls, it doesn't matter if it's the Coopers, it doesn't matter if it's the Cobles, it doesn't matter if it's the Bakers or the Willises or the Thompsons or the Hayeses or the Randy Brundridges or whoever. You have to call it as you see it if you're in the frame of mind towards reality. Whenever they come at me the way that they did over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 2009, and they voiced their opinion about me, which that's fine. That's part of freedom of speech, right? Towards me being out of the frame of reality because I had discovered the truth about how that their officials lied to their own people. You would think that people would have the decency about them to be able to turn those wrongs into rights. Apparently, we're dealing with a generation today that is all based around corruption. It's not based upon fairness. It's not based upon justfulness. Because if it was, I feel like that these people would have done already come clean and at least sent in a letter to 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, or maybe texting, or maybe driving out here politely and having a one-on-one talk. But I'm not seeing that.
keeping it in D.C. Now that House Republicans have passed that
I'm not seeing that. What I'm seeing is a reflection of the same type of reflection that began whenever God approached Adam. And you may be saying, but Dennis, all you've been putting out is condemnation to all the people that's guilty. Maybe, but at the same time, that's the only way that you're really going to recognize your wrongs, is to look at your wrongs and to say, you know what, maybe this is the area that we need to create a right. I mean, you're either on the right path or the wrong path, right? Just like God said, you're either hot or you're cold, that those that are lukewarm, he'll spew thee out of thy mouth. Well, while he's spewing those out of his mouth, there's going to be the lives of the innocent that's going to be affected too. That once more is going to bring that much more condemnation to the guilty, not necessarily for me, not necessarily in this lifetime, but in a lifetime to come, regardless whether your last name is a Neal, or it's a Cross, or it's a whoever. You'll give an account for these things that has occurred here. People laughed and made mockery of my patriotism, going all the way back whenever this first stepped out into the eyes of the general public. They laughed, they made mockery of it, they started bringing up excuses. Well, he's in it for this, he's a celebrity hound, he's out of his mind, he's this, he's that, he's that, he's this. And I've said all along that the whole objective, beginning in Kenton, Tennessee in 1983, was to try to stain my life to the degree that I was out of touch with reality, that we now see what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in 2009, even though they're wrong and there was a major government cover-up. The whole concept began over there in Obion County, but it multiplied. It started snowballing. You know, whenever you have a group of people that's wanting to charge you for falsifying files that has the potential of being a homegrown terrorist, the same as it would be somebody that pulled out a fire alarm, or the same as it would be that somebody that was crying fire, fire, fire in the middle of a theater, even though I wasn't in a theater and I wasn't crying fire, 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 even though I didn't pull out a fire alarm. Whenever you have a group of people that has now changed their concept from wanting to prove somebody to be an idiot or prove somebody to be out of their mind, sort of being loco, to the degree that now we're going to try to prove this individual being a harm to society. We're going to try to prove this individual of being a homegrown terrorist. That's serious. At any given day, if any judge even thinks that you're out to get the public, if they don't put you in a jailhouse 20 to life, or at least 20, of wanting to do harm to the public in a terrorism type form, in a charge such as what they was trying to do to me here in Weakley County towards falsifying files, they'll at least put you in a nut house where, if you're not crazy whenever you go in, by the time they feed you with enough Thorazine, and by the time they feed you with every other kind of chemical towards basically doing a chemical lobotomy on you, that if you're not crazy whenever you go in, you will be whenever you come out, providing that you do come out. Most of them don't never come out. They start slobbering all over their shoes. They don't know daylight from dark. They don't know who the president is. They don't know what year it is. They don't know the reality around them, to the degree that they start bumping into walls. And basically these doctors uses these people as experimental guinea pigs. You know why I know that? It's because I've seen that with my own eyes. I've seen an individual's life that was poor, that explained that the only way that he could survive was in jail or was in a incarcerated environment. And because he busted out a post office window, the next thing you know, doctors started intravenously giving him this and giving him that and giving him this, to the point that that whole human being's life is now ruined. Let's give him this drug and see if it makes his hair fall out. Let's give him this drug and see if he swells up. Let's give him this drug and see what it does to him. Chemicals has been one of the primary facts that has put the planet, not just America, but has put the planet where we are right now towards seeing the destruction that's happening to not thousands, but millions of people's lives. Millions. And the people over here in Kenton, Tennessee that took a part of this, that could have changed history, thinking that they're exempt from any type of condemnation, not necessarily coming from Dennis James Jackson, but coming from the Almighty. All these other people around here that basically ate it up, hook, line, and sinker. Dennis is a nut. From Dennis is now a homegrown terrorist. To the point of them accusing me of killing my own brother. After me going through the things that I've went through with my other two brothers, as well as my dad, to think that I've been dealing with such of a group of people like this irks my toes. And I don't mind telling you, I don't really have no desire to want to be around them. I don't have no desire to gather not 1 cent from them. Because what has occurred has already occurred. And it's very obvious that they don't want to change none of the factors. Which that's good. That's good. Because one day they'll stand in front of the same God that I stand in front of, that I help represent every day. And I know I'm not perfect. But God's going to ask them some very, very serious questions. And they better come up with some very, very serious answers. Regardless whether it was the people that I went to school with, regardless whether it was the people that I was raised up with, regardless whether it was the people that took on a movement towards wanting to destroy an individual's life for whatever reason, don't think that you're not going to be asked some very serious questions one day. And you better have some very serious answers, because if you don't, it could very well cost you your soul. And I don't say things like that lightly, because even my worst of worst enemies, I don't wish for their soul to be condemned to hell. And if you're a true born-again Christian, I don't think you're going to wish that upon any of your enemies. But at the same time, that don't mean that you're going to be thrown out there toward being somebody's whipping post or somebody's floor mat. Because that's where the true Christians has to draw the line and say, you know what? I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to allow myself to be whored out. I'm not going to allow myself to be cheated or taken advantage of this way. The cheaters, the liars, the connivers, the make-believers, the lukewarmers, they're the ones right now that's throwing all kinds of fits. Oh, we can't do this, we can't do this. Really? You rather have that than to have somebody like Donald J. Trump? We have people, God has put people, kind of like playing a chess game as far as I'm concerned. I'm using a chess game as an example. We have people that God has put in play, put in power, that it has taken, listen to me, it has taken this to awaken society. Now, you can either be like you was, or you can be like your ancestors was, towards continually putting your hands underneath your hips and taking your head and sticking it in the sand and being like an ostrich and not having no type of interaction with the public by saying, out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind. I don't see it, I don't hear it, I don't know nothing about it. Don't want to know nothing about it. It don't affect me, it don't affect me, it don't affect me. In the meantime, while you're pouring gas into your automobile, seeing those numbers tick, 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 tick. While people now are draining their 401ks and their retirement and going up in so much credit card indebtedness that it ain't even funny, and they're still missing their car payments. They're still being late on their house payments. They still can't keep up with the inflation that once more Satan over in Saudi Arabia, that's in control of OPEC, put upon to society. It was Satan that deceived the people. It was Satan that created all this greed. It is Satan that wants to distort the public by saying, well, it ain't my fault. It was her fault. Well, it's their fault. It ain't my fault. Really? Really? That's the whole primary purpose for God having a judgment day in the supernatural world, in the spirit world, in the hereafter world, towards one day gonna question even Adam, even Eve, even all them other people that we've read about and heard about in the Bible. For the most part, those that are debatable will still be questioned on Judgment Day. Why did you do what you done? Or why didn't you do what you done? And I just pray to God that those people will have a good, clear conscience and a good, clear answer. Because at that point in time, that will put the risks, such as has not been known to humanity, in every individual soul that has ever come into the existence of this planet, at risk of losing their soul. Because once the Antichrist himself, the Luciferian Lucifer, once Satan is dismissed out of that prison temporarily, including the false prophet and etc., to go and deceive the nations once more again in the Gog and Magog, that will be the determining factor, my friends, of whether or not you spend the rest of your life in an eternally hell, or whether or not you barely escape the consequences by proving to God, not to me, but to God, that you was remorsefully sorry for what you've done in this lifetime, and that you're now have come to your wits in understanding that, hey, I ain't going down that route. I ain't following after that guy no more. I ain't following after that demonic spirit, because you know what's going to happen to those spirits? According to the Bible, it says that great fire came down out of heaven, or come down out of New Jerusalem, that consumed them for the final and last time in the process of the war of Armageddon, in thinking that they're actually going to be able to fight still, after all this, against the Holy Father and the Holy Father's people. That's whenever fire will consume them, which will be the second death. That will be whenever those who could have made it won't. You will never have a second chance, if you want to look at that towards it being a second chance, but you will basically lose any involvement towards a reality of eternalness, of you spending eternal life in a heavenly form or in a good form. And from then on, it's all bad. It's all bad. And just the very separation between God, the Creator, and yourself will be torment, will be hell. And we know, according to the Bible, that to whom much is given, much is required. There was more given to the supernatural world pertaining to the Luciferian Lucifer and those that defiled the temple by causing a tumult up in heaven, that those people will be held even to a different level of punishment towards, they won't be dissolved. They won't disintegrate. They won't go into the hereafter the way that the mortals will. There's a place designed purposely for the Luciferian Lucifer, the false prophet, the Antichrist, all the above, that will be put in torment day in and day out. That I personally look forward to that day because of all the pain and destruction and all the agony and all the above that they have brought up into the lives of the innocent, regardless whether it's this generation, the generation before me, the generation before them, the generation before them, going all the way back to the beginning of Adam and Eve. All that pain, all that deception, all that evil will now finally one day give an account in a righteous, justifiable way that you was at fault and now you pay the price. In the meantime, God creates a new earth, a new heaven, and all the former things will be away. And from then on, we will live according to the way that God intended for us to live, without this entity of influence towards trying to influence us in a negative way or influencing us in a bad way towards leaving the righteousness of God and now come over to the dark side and start living that way. That temptation will no longer exist. And really and truly, I feel sorry about those that are weak-minded, those that don't have strong spirits, those that was given into temptation that did fall into that direction and kept going into that direction. That basically, whenever the Bible expresses itself, for I will give you over to a reprobate mind to allow for you to believe a lie and to be damned, it's not that God had damned you pertaining to condemnation, but it's basically you have made a conscious choice of damning your own soul. And it will be you, ultimately, that will pay the price, because it was you that made that final choice towards whether or not you wanted to go to the right or to the left. No questions about it. In other words, the love of God is on different levels, pertaining to 0 level all the way up to 100. Love thy God with all thy heart, mind, body, and soul. What's the greatest commandment of all the commandments? They asked Jesus, to love thy God with all thy heart, mind, body, and soul. I realize that some people that only loves God 10%, they may actually see themselves as loving God 100%. It will be God and God alone that will make that determination. Some people that claim that they love God 50%, 75%, maybe 80 or 90%, it will be God that makes that final determination, because I can't make that for you. And it really and truly is probably going to be difficult for me to make that for myself. I think that I know the percentage level of how much I love the Father. And I love the Father enough that I'm willing to die for the Father, even 1,000 deaths if I'm wrong. But that's just it. I know that I'm not. And I'm going to stand on the right side of history pertaining to the righteousness of God, even though I myself may make imperfections and may make mistakes and may have to ultimately pay for those mistakes one day, I'm still going to stand for a righteous, holy, eternal God, the creator of this universe, the great I am, the Alpha and Omega, pertaining to the Lord Jesus Christ, of believing that he was all the above, that he wasn't just in the form of a man. He wasn't just a prophet. He wasn't just a teacher. He wasn't a disciple or an apostle. He actually was God. He actually was God. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. And I just pray to God that this will be turned around to the degree that we will see a temporary peace or utopia, as I've been talking about now for 30 some odd years to the public, that you cannot take peace from the second horseman or the second seal unless there's peace upon the earth to take. Now, you can formulate a false peace. You can talk about peace all day long, kind of like the Reagans and the Bushes did shortly after those 9 tapes went to the White House. But true, authentic, holy, eternal, godly peace, according to the Bible, will fall upon a mankind before the opening of that second seal. So you wonder about all the commotion and the racket that's going on right now. Why is everybody in such a hither, as my grandmother used to say? Well, it's all part of prophecy coming true. For one of God's creatures in heaven heard the noises that was alarmed. He went over, run real quick to the edge of heaven and looked down at earth. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing and hearing. And all of a sudden he turned around and said, "Come and see! Come and see!" And everybody else comes running over there to the side and looks down at earth and says, "My God, you're right. For it was as the noise of thunder." Just like the moon being turned to blood. Don't say in the Bible that the moon's going to be turned to blood. It says in the Bible that the moon will be turned into as blood, indicating that the moon will be red. There's so many misinterpreted scriptures that it's unbelievable in how that the blind has led the blind in the degree of where we are right now. And these people that has done this, that think that they have gotten away with this, that's fine. Believe what you want to believe. But don't dump it down in my doorstep for me to have to kick it out of the way, because I know better. And if that's what's keeping you away from me or keeping you away from the Windmill Ministries missions, that's fine too. Because you know what? I don't need that type of support. I don't need that type of Joe Osteen congregation, regardless whether it's coming from the people in Alamo Baptist Church or the First Baptist Church in Kenton, Tennessee, or the Assembly of God or the Church of God, or it's coming from the First Baptist Church in Sidonia, or the Assembly of God Church in Sidonia, or the churches in Sharon, or the churches in Martin. I don't need that type of support. My son, I think, was kind of halfway offended. Bear with me for 1 second, please. Whenever he decided, before Thanksgiving, that he was going to send me or give me $100. Never given me nothing in response towards the ministry. As a matter of fact, was actually felt ashamed or begrudged the fact that I had took him on the first trip with the Windmill Ministries missions on our first crusade up to Washington, D.C. and New York. But he was actually offended because I took the $100 and I ripped it up. One side of the check is over here. The other side of the check is right there. This is my son's rosary that he surrendered to me. And I put this rosary and these two checks cut in half on this angel. And you know what his response was at first? Gee, Dad, I hope that she can bear the burden. So do I, pertaining to the real angels. But you know what? I know that they can bear the burden. No matter what Satan and Satan's people may throw at God, he can take it. That don't mean that they like it, but they can cope with it. Now the next question is this. If I didn't desire and want money, monetary money, from my son, just what exactly did Mr. Jackson want after 30 some odd years has passed in basically being demonized and dehumanized, beaten up, degraded, abused by the public? What exactly did Juby want from his son, his only flesh and blood biological son? He wanted cooperation. He wanted support. And I feel like today, those are the things that people like Donald J. Trump and people like Elon Musk, they really want. The money's fine. Don't get me wrong. Money's good. Money's what makes the world turn, right? But I don't want to take blood money from people that receive that money in the wrong way. And I don't want to take money for people that pities me, because the pity shouldn't be for me. No. The pity should be for yourselves and for your children and your children's children that allowed for this to get this far out of hand. So whenever it comes to pity, don't send me contributions in a monetary form over pity, because I don't want your pity. I want your cooperation. I want your support. And you can support people and never give a dime. Did you know that? You can support people in prayer. You can support people consciously, subconsciously. You can support people metaphorically. You can support people spiritually. You can pray for that person. And don't think for a second that I don't appreciate all those that did pray for me last year during the time that I was going through what I was going through over an operation. That today, I'm pretty well 98, 99% healed. I won't never be 100%. just the pure mere fact of me breaking both legs and crushing both ankles, I'll never be 100%. I'll always have a sense of disability, no matter how well I may cover it up, or no matter how well I may be able to walk or talk or run or whatever. I'm still not going to be at that 100% level as you would look at a true person that can run, let's say, the Iron Lung, or do whatever pertaining to some of these marathons that are run. I'll never be that. And I know that. I have accepted that at my age. I've accepted that, especially with all the other injuries that adds to those injuries. But you know what? If that's what it took to humble my heart, as I've said before, there was a silver lining in the fact of me falling off of that 4-story building whenever I was hanging steel as a connector, as an iron worker. And the silver lining of that was, if I would have stayed on the road that I was on, in thinking that I was invincible, I promise you, I would have either wound up dead, or wound up killing somebody, or wound up shooting myself in the foot towards spending the rest of my life in jail. Because I was a heathen back then. And I was running from God. And I was running from the anointing that God was calling me into. Well, I've quit running. I've quit running. Now at the age of 63. I hope that this year will be a better year for me, pertaining to getting back in shape, losing weight, becoming more stern, becoming more mentally sound, physically sound, more spiritually sound. And I hope that I can help those out there that are struggling so dearly, so desperately in the decisions that was made in front of them that really and truly they didn't have nothing to do with. Those are the people that I pity. Those are the people that I pray for every day, because I know deep down in their hearts and in their mind's eye that if they had anything at all to do with all this mess, it would have been handled differently. It would have been handled much differently. Just like I think if I had already regained or gained, whichever word you want to say, a popularity like a Joe Osteen or an Oral Roberts or a Billy Graham, I truly don't think that the people up in Kentucky would have treated me the way that they did. Matter of fact, I know that they wouldn't have up in Land Between the Lakes, Western Kentucky. And I for darn sure don't think that the people out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, would have tried to pull the wool over the public's eyes in trying to promote me as me being a monster just because I was down there investigating what actually occurred. Now the milk's been spilled. The toothpaste is out of the tube. The genie is out of the bottle regarding the truth, the whole truth, pertaining to Mr. Jackson's life and the lifespan of the Windmill Ministries missions that began basically in 1989. Now we move on with our lives. We don't dwell in the past. We learn from the past, and we learn not to make the same mistakes as the past. But whenever you don't see the evidence of that, you still start scratching your head. Maybe they are doomed. Maybe there is no hope for society. I hope that there is hope for society. And people like Donald J. Trump and others that get on TV and talk about all these problems pertaining to the abusiveness that's been going on. It wasn't just the financial abusiveness that was going on. It wasn't just the monetary abusiveness that was going on. It was psychological abusiveness. It was physical and spiritual abusivenesses. It was emotional abusivenesses. Look at all the thousands and millions of lives that has been destroyed since 1988, whenever 9 tapes went to the White House, that somebody's going to give in a Galmore one day. Look at all the millions of lives that has been torn apart and been destroyed. That I guarantee you, people like that had a part of, that has been in power now for 35, 40 years, that has sat back and they've taken the money, and man, they have poking their pockets full. It wasn't the generation that's growing up today to point their finger at and say, well, it's your fault. It's those that took a part in this travesty. So whenever it sounds like that I'm condemning or bringing condemnation to various people, I guess in a way I am, because if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, odds are it's probably a duck. And I'm not so far out in left field that I can't accept the truth regarding the criticism that I spew out to others. But there's a difference in spewing out criticism and it not being just criticism versus godly, righteous, just criticism. So as my grandmother used to always tell us, boys, you'll be the ones that will lay in your own bed after you make it hard. And if the shoe fits, wear it. That would be what I would tell a great deal of people down here in Alamo Baptist Church. Not all of them, because not all of them participated in this. Not all of them know about this. Same way with the churches over there in Kenton, Tennessee. The same way with the people over in Martin, Tennessee. The same way with Central Baptist Church or First Baptist Church in Martin, Tennessee. The same way with Sharon, Greenfield, Dresden, all these other different authority figures around here, including the judges and the politicians. I know that not everybody took a part of this conspiracy or this travesty. And that's exactly what it was. It was a conspiracy. One or more people that confides in doing the same thing at the same time is considered a conspiracy. And that's exactly what you've done. And today, I just praise God that I'm still alive and well, and that I can explain myself to the public as well as to my granddaughter towards what exactly happened, Grandpa. What happened, Papa? How come they thought that? How come they done that? You know, I can't answer to all them questions because I don't know why they done what they done. Maybe they was cowards. Maybe they never did have no true relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ to begin with. Maybe they was so deceived that they thought that heaven was going to be here on earth and not actually up there. I don't know. I can't give an account for those people in what they either done or didn't do that they should have done. But what I can do is give an account for me. Because the Bible is very clear in God positioning somebody towards being a watchman on the wall. And if that watchman on the wall did not blow the trumpet in telling those that he or she was responsible for, then their blood will fall upon to the watchman's feet and to the watchmen that God put in place to warn the people. Because I promise you, I have been putting out warnings and advisories now for 30 some odd years pertaining to all this. And didn't nobody that I know of. I'm sure there's some people out there. I'm sure I got some secret admirers out there somewhere. But they didn't come forth. They didn't come forth in a positive way. Oh, I got all kinds of negative activity. Just like me coming back here in 2014, and the next thing you know, me not knowing if my only dependence pertaining to my disability that I really deserved, going all the way back to 1979, was at stake or not. I understand that there's a lot of people right now that is hoodooing the government. You know, just like I got off the phone a while ago, there's probably 6 or 7 generations down in Memphis, Tennessee, and Jackson, and all these other different bigger areas, not just in Tennessee, but all over the country, that has basically raised up generations of children off of welfare and Social Security. And it used to be that if a woman had child after child after child after child, well, that was going to be that much money, that much more money that they could scam out of Big Brother, which was scamming us, the taxpayers. And there's so many other thousands of different ways that you can be fraudulent in doing this. But I know for a fact, up until just recently, I think they finally put an end to the deal of women doing that I think now that it's a limit of maybe 3, 4 children. And then after that, I think the government finally cuts them off. because they realize they're doing it for a game. They're playing them. They're taking them for everything that they're worth. And that's what's happened to America. We've had so many people that has taken us for everything that we was worth and putting it on the shoulders of the taxpayers towards being $36+ trillion in debt. And now it's time to ante up. Now it's come time to pay the piper. But nobody wants to pay the piper. So they're still belly aching. So they're still complaining. So they're still protesting. Do you not think that all the other prophets of God standing up for righteous causes got that same resistances? I promise you they did. And I knew that whenever I first stepped out into the eyes of the public, that I was going to receive resistances. Oh yeah, I knew that because I read the Bible very clearly in seeing what happened to this guy and what happened to this lady and what happened to this person. Oh yeah, they even crucified Christ. They even crucified the very person that was bringing the message towards being the messenger. They didn't like the message. They didn't like the message then, just like the majority of them don't like the message today. I just hope that you have grown, learned, and matured enough to realize that this message that is coming from the founder of the Windmill Ministries Missions here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, is not my message. I didn't make this message up. This isn't something that I dreamed about last night and finally decided to put it on paper and say, oh, this is what's going on. Oh, no. These was predictions that was predicted way before I was even thought about. These was predictions that was predicted to occur way before even we was thought about. But God knew that we was going to make a mess of things. But he also knew that it was going to be as the noise of thunder. And one of the beasts coming and looking over the edge and saying, come and see. That's what we're seeing right now. And I'm going to thank God every day of my life that I'm now seeing what I'm seeing, which it's not a full turn. It's not a 180-degree turn towards getting us completely out of the darkness or getting us completely out of the storm, but at least I'm starting to see it turn. Father, eternal God, I just pray, Lord, for our great nation. I pray, God, for our military. I pray, God, for our presidents. I pray, God, for the people that's in charge of the cabinet members pertaining to Donald J. Trump. I just pray, God, that you, O Lord, will continue to open people's eyes and that you, God, will get the praises for that in which what we believe is going to occur towards seeing a great revival that will elevate into a revolution that will not only re-revolutionize America, but will re-revolutionize every nation up into this great planet that you've ever brought forth into the existences of existing. I want to thank you, God, for you being a righteous, merciful God for my own sins. I just pray, God, that you will lead us not into temptation, that you will deliver us from this evil. And I pray, God, for people like my son, that you will open their eyes and that they will understand that this is not about us, but it's about your divine love and your divine mercy and your divine way that has brought us as far as you have. And you haven't brought us this far to leave us, to release us out into the wilderness. You haven't brought us this far to disappoint us, but rather you have allowed for us to go through the struggles that we went through to make us that much stronger and glorifying you that much longer and that much more bolder in going boldly before the throne and talking to you. I pray, O Lord, for Elon Musk and the people around him, that things will be controlled in a more legitimate, justifiable, righteous way, no matter what takes place tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, because I know, God, that I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what the day after tomorrow holds, and nobody else on this planet neither does. But we do know who holds that tomorrow, which is you. And that's who we put our trust in. And that's who and why we want to thank you, because you're worthy of all glory, honor, and praise. In your holy Son's name, in Jesus' name, thank you, God Almighty, and amen. Good luck to all of us. I want to say God bless America. God bless our troops. And God bless our endeavors towards which way we go from this moment on, regardless of the ridiculation, regardless of the opposing forces, that I stand to this day and denounce and resist the devil in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and command these demons to get thee behind us in the name of the Lord, and believing that tomorrow, maybe not necessarily for ourselves, but for our children and for our children's children, will be a brighter tomorrow for them as well. I'm going to end by not ending by saying anything else. I'm just going to let you listen to a little bit more of this. That way you won't be distracted from the News Max message coming today, which is February, I think it's the 27th or the 28th, maybe the last day of this month in the year 2025. Please listen. Thank you very much.
It is a concerning time. Iowa does allow you to come and protest in the building and have your freedom of speech, so long as you remain civil.
And so far, you believe, at least at this moment, that it has been civil, correct? Or you've been told it has?
I have been told that. Now, during subcommittee meeting, we did have 2 people arrested who did not remain civil. So if those things happen today, our law enforcement is prepared to do the same. We have, like I said, we have well prepared for today.
Well, let me just ask a follow-up question to something we were talking about earlier, which is the bill itself, because it's just a little confusing. I know that this was put into effect, these protections, gender protections, in 2007. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 2007. So this would essentially remove that. What rights would these protesters that we're seeing on the screen, what rights are they going to lose? Because clearly they're protesting something here. Are they losing some rights by the state?
As the legislature and as my caucus sees it, no, they do not. We are, gender identity, gender theory is something that we just, back in 2007 put into the code. But as we all know, we have men and women's spaces. We have passed laws in the state of Iowa early on to protect women in sports, to try to make sure that in our schools we keep boys and biological men out of the bathrooms. And we are to a point now, in 2019, the Supreme Court ruling said that taxpayers must fund sex reassignment surgeries in the state of Iowa with our Medicaid and civil rights laws, which include gender identity. So we are at a point where actually the current law as it stands and the way civil rights are here in Iowa, their rights are infringing on other people's rights, and that's not the intent of civil rights ever. So we are all humans, and every single Iowan deserves to have their human rights protected and to be treated with dignity and respect. This bill doesn't take away any basic rights away from transgender individuals. Current code actually results in the infringement, so we want to make sure that we repeal that and we get everybody back to equal rights, where our female spaces are protected and we no longer have to continue to remain in court over these issues.
Wow. Just incredible, by the way. And we know, we've heard this phrase before, elections have consequences. And perhaps, State Rep, you could just explain the makeup of the legislature of Iowa for us. Is it a clear Republican majority? Do you expect these changes to be voted on?
So we have 66 in the House, in the majority Republicans. The Senate has already passed this legislation, I believe, today. And so I do believe that this will be voted on and come to the House floor, yes.
And as you already told us, about these threats that you're receiving, which again you stated on the show, and if you would repeat for us, what exactly are you being threatened over, and how concerned, I guess the highlight of this would be, how concerned are you about the threats that you've received? Are they very generic? Are they specific towards you, your family, or what exactly has happened?
Well, today in the committee, a gentleman made threatening comments, and then subcommittee members who ran this bill earlier had individual threats. We've had law enforcement officers come to our homes and been offered things like protective vests if we would like them for the week, just to be safe. And I don't think that I'm not aware of anybody that's taken up that extreme measure. But we are in a time where obviously tempers run high, and this is a very contentious issue, and we're aware of people's thoughts and feelings here. But this is something that must be done for the state of Iowa, and as legislators, we sign up to make sure that the entire state of Iowa is treated equally, and so that's what we're doing here today.
And what have you heard from the governor, Kim Reynolds? Does she also support this legislation?
I have not heard her stance on this piece of legislation. You would have to contact her, but I know that she stood right alongside us in making sure that our women's spaces were protected. She was a strong advocate on making sure that women's sports were protected. We are a strong common sense state here.
Yeah, again, two genders. This is what, again, is being having these protesters outraged about, and it's gotten to the point, obviously, just to point out, they're legally there within the Capitol, and if they do so in a civil manner, they can say. Two were arrested, according to the state rep we just spoke with, and they were taken out because they weren't acting civilly in that moment. But it's the threats at this time that really have stirred a lot of concern. Especially over this specific bill, which we'll continue to watch coming out of Iowa. I want to thank you for your time. That's Iowa State Representative Brooke Bowden, who is there in the building. Best to you at this time. We know it's difficult, and we'd love to check back in with you.
Thank you. I look forward to God's blessings to you.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, we'll continue to monitor this and what's happening here and also in D.C. with Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK.